really believe in artificial intelligence when I see a machine doing what Holmes did today at the beginning of the session and looking at these big signals in the faces of people and guessing numbers and these kind of things. That will be a real breakthrough. So let me tell you a little bit about intelligent systems and why we thought this is a session worth having, because independently of all the capabilities that we have today with AI, you really want to do something about it, and that AI is not only about recognizing cats from dogs, but actually if you want to make money in some way, or if you want to build a product, or if you want to provide a services that recognizes cats and dogs, there's the whole experience side to it, and there's much more to it. So about 10 years ago, I lived in the French Alps. These are not the French Alps. This is Norway, by the way. But and with my wife, we decided to build our third intelligent system, right? And her name is Mila. She's in that photo. She's almost 11 by now. And at that time, there were 5 intelligent systems at home, which were Mila's 2 brothers, my wife, and I. Not more than that. And now there's much more, because if we think about intelligence in its simplest definition, which is the capability to acquire and apply knowledge, well, we comply with that. My teenager sons, there's some days that they don't comply with that, but most of the days they do. And the dog that came in afterwards was another intelligent system in the house. He can acquire and he can apply knowledge. He's not too smart, but he can do that. But then there's a lot of software systems like the ones we've been talking these days that they live in my house, and we have Spotify, and we have Netflix, and we have HBO, and those systems also comply with that basic definition of intelligence, in the sense that they can acquire and they can apply knowledge. And Spotify can learn from my musical habits and from the habits of millions in order to provide me a musical experience. So it's actually learning from the knowledge, and it's providing it to me. And we have a Nest meter, and we have an Amazon Echo. So there's a ton of intelligent systems in the house. And we're seeing that a lot of the systems, simple systems, right, very complex like a car, are evolving towards systems that are actually acquiring and applying knowledge like a driverless car. And that application of knowledge requires some very difficult decisions, like choosing the best path to take me from one place to the other, or not killing anybody along the way, or even choosing who to kill if the occasion came. We have Spotify that I mentioned. The company that I'm working in right now that Oz mentioned, we're trying to transform farming into an intelligent system, right? So right now, the intelligent side of farming is mostly the farmer, to whom I provide some type of information like a satellite image, and the farmer can act on top of that image. And we're building systems such that the satellite can connect directly to the actual farming infrastructure. So some very tough decisions in terms of where to irrigate or where to fertilize can be taken automatically by the systems in a smart way. So all these systems have much more complex components aside from the actual algorithm. 10 years ago, about the time we ordered our third intelligent system at home, I started to build the first intelligent system I ever built, of fortunately several more at work. So I was tasked to build the on-street parking system for the city of Los Angeles. And basically that task consisted in having these parking sensors distributed in the city, and doing some kind of pricing scheme to distribute cars and to alleviate parking by raising the price in some areas, and also nurture parking, or basically encourage parking in other areas by diminishing the price. As a data guy, as a machine learning guy, for me that was, okay, let's get the data, let's predict who will go where, and let's fix the price from that. And soon after taking that very smart decision on how to design that intelligent system for parking in the city of LA, I found out that it was absolutely useless unless I started looking at how people behave. So I had to bring in all these game theory and mechanism design and designers and anthropologists into the team, because it turns out that people take some very silly decisions with respect to their economic decisions and with respect to parking. Turns out that if you design the wrong application and you raise the price of parking without them knowing, they might get really pissed off at the city because of you. And all these very tiny irrational things need to be taken into account. So intelligent systems have all these additional components. Okay? So this is what we want to talk today. Not only the AI, the machine learning component, the heart of that intelligent system, but how do we interact? How do we complement that with much more information? So I'm very glad that both Fabian and Daniel accepted to be in this panel today. I admire their work, both of them, and they have always worked at the intersection between technology and design and people with a very human-centric view of the development of these systems. Daniel, he has founded OFFC, which is a research and design firm here in New York City. He has worked at the intersection between technology experimentation and cultural understanding, and he has a ton of awards. You should really look up what he's done. He's done some very nice experiments at the intersection of technology and people, and he has worked with some of the top agencies and design agencies in the world. And Fabian, he's the CEO of BBVA Data and Analytics, a company which I started a while ago, and we were lucky to work together. And Fabian is also the founder of a very interesting organization called the Near Future Lab, where they coined the term design fiction, where they're thinking not very far away, but as they say, in the near future, what kind of things will be essentially different from what they are today. They also did some very nice work. And for instance, imagining what a sports newspaper would look like with all the AI technology that is coming in 20 years from now, 10 years from now. How much was that?
In the near future.
In the near future. There you go. Don't
yeah.
Disclaimer.
Yeah. No, it doesn't really matter how far away it is. What is important is to understand what should we understand today to actually have an impact on that future, to understand how we can bend that visions or that future. So it doesn't really matter if it's in 5 or 10.
He did one which is amazing, which is the IKEA manual. You know that the IKEA manual has more yearly prints than the Bible, right? Any book in the world. And they did the IKEA manual of the future. Very nice work, also exposed in many museums and centers, even in the Manchester Football Museum, right?
Yes.
So we're going to do this way. We're going to give Fabian 10 minutes to talk to us about his work, and Daniel 10 minutes, and then we'll have a 20-minute conversation among ourselves about the challenges in building intelligent systems.
You give me
I'll give it to you, and we can sit there. Good.
I think it's better if I present from here. So thanks, Marco, for the presentation. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be in New York. I'm going to just give you a bit of my perspective on the relationship between kind of algorithms and design in general, or data science and design in general. So I'm the co-CEO of BBVA Data Analytics. We are a center of excellence as part of BBVA, a retail bank based in Spain, but also that operates internationally, globally. What we do with a team of 50 data scientists is to help that big organization become more data-driven. And we do that as an ambidextrous company, in a sense that we focus a lot on what are today's problems for a large bank and how to tackle them with data and algorithms and with data science. So it means that we work on fraud, risk, payments, advisory, these kind of things that are part of the ongoing kind of challenges of a bank today. But we are ambitious because we also try to anticipate what's coming. So we explore the future and try to understand what will be the demand of tomorrow, of the near future, for a bank and for an organization that is a center of excellence. So that's why AI is one of our big topic, but we don't necessarily we think about technology and the algorithms, but we think of how they impact a bank, like in the topics of trust, for instance, or responsible business, and the kind of products that can come into the near future. So as part of the discussion, if this works, yes, this is me. As part of the discussion, let me go a bit, we talked a lot about Spotify, so let me get deeper into and asking you, how many of you actually use Spotify? Okay. And how many of you actually know how the recommender system works? Good. So I've seen some hands not raised. So let me give you just a hint of how actually that works and what is important actually for all of us to know based on that. So Spotify learns from our interaction with the system. So it learns from the kind of songs that we listen to and also the kind of song we save into our playlist. And it builds a profile, kind of a taste profile of who we are. And it does that for us individually, but also for the millions of other users. So it works on both ways, individually and also a massive amount of people. And what it does is it matches your profile with similar profile of these millions of users. And it finds out what are the songs you've not listened to that these other similar profiles have listened to. And it just, every week in the Discovery Weekly, for instance, you receive a mixtape of these kind of songs of actually people who have similar taste as you are of the song that we have not listened to. So this is very, very basic. A key element here to understand is this feedback loop. It's actually that we generate information through interaction. It's analyzed and then put back into the experience to generate more interaction that generate more data. And it happens for each of us. So that's kind of a basic element, I think, that is important to think in terms of design and for designers when we build this kind of experiences that are based on AI. And similarly, when Amazon describes how Echo works, it's interesting that they highlight that it's a service that continuously learns and adds more functionality over time. And for me, it's kind of a fundamental shift on how we design systems nowadays. First of all, it's not a machine that only learns from you, but it learns actually from millions of other people. And we're kind of pulled into a new type of coevolution between humans, between us, and this type of technologies. And because first of all, this kind of machine starts to adapt to our behavior, to our kind of taste. So that's one aspect. And the other aspect is that we are to start to adapt to these machines. Because when we talk to an Alexa, for instance, our language is slightly different than the regular language that we actually use. So there's this coevolution that for me is kind of fundamental. And once again, it's the other kind of element after the feedback loop is that it happens with one individual and from millions of other people. So this machine learns from many, many people. So we train Alexa on a daily basis. And then in the same way, we adapt to the way that we have to talk to Alexa. And that kind of makes me think that there's an evolution in design that started from interaction design, experience design. And I think that now there is a focus on actually relation design, or the design of the relationship between human and machines. And this is kind of new to think about that. And AI and data are part of that evolution. So think for instance, about Fitbit and how it's a gadget that monitors our lives and shapes our activities, because the results of the analysis actually suggests that we have to change our behavior. And when we have to design this kind of system like Fitbit, of course, there's the onboarding design that we have to do to get people engaged, to purchase actually the system. This is kind of basic, but overall, like with Alexa and Echo, the experience evolves while we use this kind of systems. So the design has to evolve as well. So after onboarding, we have to design for the discovery of the proper user of its own activity. When you're done discovering yourself, then you have to start to create habits. That's one objective of Fitbit, is to create these habits for you to move more or move differently. That's another kind of design. And then you have to sustain that kind of engagement. You have to keep people busy and keep them using Fitbit. That's, here again, another kind of design for engagement. And eventually there's one day that this gadget and this service stops to be useful. And it might end up in a box or somewhere or eventually in the trash. And this is something that is not well designed currently, is that when the life of that gadget is over, actually our personal data are still there. There is some value that is out there. So I haven't seen many companies actually designing the offboarding activity of this kind of device, because probably there's a life afterwards. There's a life after you use Fitbit, because your data are there to do something else with them. So at BVA Data Analytics, we try to engage with this kind of scenarios and think beyond the technology and think about these terms as well. What is the onboarding, but also what is the offboarding? When we have a relationship with customers, what happens when they stop using one service, and what can we propose them to do afterwards? And for instance, how can we use the accumulated reputation that customers have with us into proposing new services? For instance, how can we use our scoring algorithm in a different way than just giving a loan to a customer? How can we help, for instance, young customers negotiate the terms of their rent just because they have a reputation with us? And there's a concept here of portable reputation that AI helps to give, and data with that. And that are kind of interesting for us to explore. And the way that we do that is the way that, Marco, you presented a little bit. We do these kind of design fictions and try to project into the future these kind of capabilities of scoring algorithms, the reputation that and the relationship that we have with clients, to understand what can we do after, what can we do in an evolution of that relationship. So I'm just going to give you one small example of one of these fiction. It's one way we create these fictions is to hack the actual advertisement of BBVA, and we hack them and project them slightly into the future and providing like new kind of thinking. And for us, it's a way to engage not only our data scientists, it's a way to engage with designers, to people in business areas, and also with customers to understand if is this something we really want? Is this something that is interesting to build? So it's a 30 seconds advertisement with the sound. So all of that is fictional. What is not fictional is is the support that everybody within the organization actually know. It's the visual language. This is known. So for us, it's a way to provoke the whole organization into thinking that might happen. And if that happens, and if we decide that portable reputation is a business for us, what should happen? And from there, we start to work backwards. What kind of technologies and algorithms do we need to build today to make that happen into the near future. So it's kind of Marco, my perspective on the relationship between design and data science and AI in general.
Thank you very much, Fabian. That's interesting. And I have a few questions that I didn't have, and now I do have. So be ready. So Daniel, can you tell us a little bit?
Yes. Hi, my name is Daniel Amaya. I run a small design studio. My background is more on the human-centered design process. I worked for the IDEO office in New York, and I'm very curious and interested in how to marry the human-centered design process with data-driven and AI capabilities. And so for the clients I work with, for example, for Audi, Telefonica, and sometimes BBVA, we help them to transform their technologies into new products and services. But one of the things that we also do with them is that we visualize the potential social and everyday implications that these services could have. So I was always fascinated by, not by me, but by the work of the Gilbreth. And the Gilbreth had construction companies and were bricklayers. And what they did was they used time-lapse photography to make the motions of the bricklayers more efficient. And I was always fascinated by how they used technologies to increase the efficiency of the motions. But it was basically on a micro level. They made their process more efficient, but they didn't rethink the process on a macro level, because it worked fine for laying bricks in that case. And so in our processes today, we have obviously become much more multidisciplinary, and we work in very different ways because we don't produce bricks but highly complex systems. But very simplified, typically, we have a technology, a system, or an algorithm, and then me or us as designers, we help to design the inputs and outputs for these systems. And it's a little bit like that sometimes. I feel, although I love my Spotify playlist, I love my taking the Uber, I love when the seamless delivery comes, but I think a lot of times, or often, we sort of help to design the inputs and outputs for algorithmic black boxes that you don't quite lose a little bit the understanding of how they work. And sometimes these black boxes then produce unintended consequences. And for example, this was a recent thing that went across the internet where a couple took a picture of them and it was mislabeled as gorillas by the Google algorithm because the image set that the algorithm was trained with only trained with white people. The other thing was, which I'm still quite surprised that could make its way into the final product, was a soap dispenser that only gave soap for white skin because the sensor was blind to darker skin in that sense. Or the classic example of how a father found out that his daughter was pregnant by the coupons that she got on the receipts while shopping at Target. And so I feel I'm very fascinated and interested by these unintended consequences, and I feel how we can find ways to visualize them before they happen out in the wild, and how we can anticipate them and help to anticipate them before they find their way into the product. And it's a little bit that we, obviously as designers, we don't design artifacts anymore, but we design complex systems that have relationships in themselves, and all the individual parts, feedback each other, and we design more the relationships in between those parts. And personally, as I said, I'm very interested in exploring these new ways and processes of marrying human-centered design, research, and algorithmic processes in my work.
Thank you very much, Daniel. That's interesting. So I think we could leave this video and just watch it for 20 minutes. And
yeah, let's just.
It is hypnotizing. It's so good, those birds. So we put here some of the basic ingredients in designing intelligent systems, some very basic also definition of intelligence, and focus a lot on the acquiring and applying knowledge, on the learning part. I think you touched on some very nice topics like the coevolution. An intelligent system is in some ways alive. It changes over time. It can move into unintended consequences, so you have to carries it along the way. What do you think are the main ingredients, if they are these, or there's anything more that needs to be compared when designing intelligent systems, when building intelligent systems? Any of you?
From our perspective, there are three ingredients that are important. one is, and I'm going to talk about more about the kind of the skill sets and how that should work. One is the kind of the scientific method. It's whatever we build are based on hypotheses, and hypotheses that we have to evaluate eventually. So that's one aspect where we're like hypothesis driven, and I think it's important to be able to build experiments where we can evaluate these kind of consequences. The kind of the consequences that Daniel was mentioning, those are the ones that have to be experimented in a closed environment, and it's tricky actually to be able to understand if we cover the whole world, or cover all the kind of interactions, or not. But one is this scientific approach. Another one is uncertainty, and because whatever kind of things that we're building, they're not perfect at all, and it's a very imperfect technology, and it's a technology that has this level of uncertainty. So it's important to whenever we design these systems, is to understand like how good are they, and how much we should communicate how good they are. And those are kind of two ingredients that I think are important in design.
Yeah, I agree with what Fabienne said. I think, obviously there's like a big component of these systems have to be adaptable, flexible. But I found it also like, how can we design for misunderstanding and the fuzziness that we as humans have in our interactions with these systems? And one thing, for example, like how can we enhance the understanding of context? There's these examples of, I tell an autonomous car, take me to the airport as fast as possible, and I have police cars following me because that's the objective that it had. So how can we increase the context about that? But also how can we embed values into AI that the AI acts upon, that resemble the values that we as humans have, for example.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about how you build these things, because you were talking in your example, Fabienne, about design for fairness, for instance, or you're doing the Fitbit and you want to design for encouraging people to have a healthy life, or you're doing a financial application that you want to design for people to have peace of mind or trust and so forth. So from a design standpoint, this is all very nice, but when you're working with the data guys, they're just minimizing the error rate, right? Yeah. Or they're just finding, area under the curve or some kind of very, very statistically measurable metric. How do you bring these together? How do you bring design goals into data science?
Well, that's one challenge. That's one challenge that is related to interdisciplinarity and actually being able to have a capacity for both designers and data scientists to translate a little bit the language of others. For instance, a recommender system, a recommendation, is very different from a data scientist's point of view than from a designer's point of view. But they talk about, the objective is not the same, but the word is the same. So we face these kind of challenges of having teams working together, but they don't actually share the same language. They don't actually share the same kind of practice of exploration, because design is very exploratory and can change its path from here and there. It goes through inspirations. And data science is scientific driven. It goes into an evaluation and goes kind of into a funnel to find a solution. So it's part of the challenge of having this team working together. And these fictions that I shared for us is to have a totem where these disciplines can look at the same kind of result eventually and say, oh, this is our objective. This is how it should work. This is the language we should use to make that happen. And we actually understand that objective. So for us, this kind of material is a way to bring these disciplines together.
Yeah. So I like Daniel did one experiment called Data Futures, where I believe he made explicit these interactions between people and data and technology and design through that experiment. I recommend, if you haven't seen it, there's videos online. You just Google Daniel data futures and you should get somewhere
Should come up.
nearby. So can you tell us about that experiment?
Yeah, sure.
And what you were
sure.
trying?
It was an experiment we originally did at the Interaction Design Conference in New York, and it was based upon a class I teach once a year at SVA. And the broad idea is, for the class, for example, is the students install an app 2 months before the class starts. And so they bring their own location data to the class rather than a third-party data set. And we run them through a series of exercises where they look at their own data. But then we say, okay, now we switch data, and I get Marco's data, and Marcos gets Fabienne, and Fabienne's get mine, and we present each other to the class as we see each other through our data. And it's quite interesting in the way that you're suddenly the subject of a presentation in an intimate setting as the class, as something meaningful or meaningless as your data, and you don't quite know what they found out about you, and it teaches them a lot about the biases in data. And we redid that at a conference where we had an app where people could interact. We ran them through a series of questions, and it was live visualized on the screens with the idea that the audience visualizes themselves, and you get an idea for, okay, there are like a lot of 25-year-olds in the audience, and we had a few funny questions in there. And then we basically correlated the data sources and segmented the audience and changed the background color of their phones and made several segments of the audience light up. And the idea here was that we all know rationally what can happen with our data, but that emotional experience teaches us a lot more and makes them understand and experiment on a smaller setting what the processes are that we experience on a day-to-day level with data and the apps and services that we use.
So there's a part of there where you start asking very simple questions like color of the hair or color of the shirt or where they live or even race and so forth. Everybody has a problem in saying, but there's a point that if you start intersecting all those dimensions, you reach the individual level. So you bridge like a privacy gap.
So one of the big debates that we had was how intimate can you get with the questions? Like you don't want to violate people and you don't want them to walk out of your talk because it's kind of.
So how do you see, because this I like that in a way you put on the same level ground the positive and the negative impacts of AI, and privacy is one, but we've mentioned many. And Martin in the introduction mentioned the debate between Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg about positive and negative impact. Where do you see AI having the biggest impact, positive or negative? And this is for both of you in our everyday lives in the near future.
I feel personally that I don't have I don't share either of the extreme positions. I feel what I see as our responsibility that we visualize the consequences or that we help people to understand what the impacts are going to be and make them discussable by making them visual. And I think one of the things that I think is going to be interesting is that shifting line of acceptance. Like with a very simple example, in '95, we thought it was unimaginably that we post our videos on YouTube. And now it's completely normal. So I think there are going to be a lot of things that we might perceive right now as, offensive or problematic that we're going to adapt to inevitably over the next years. So I feel it's different. I think it's important to discuss the things, but I feel a lot of the things are going to change in our perception and comfort with how we work with these systems.
Yeah.
I agree with Daniel, and it goes back into this notion of coevolution in the sense that I don't have like a techno-deterministic view of AI is going to really change that because we're part of that evolution. We have a word to say into that evolution. So I don't take a stand on thinking about the utopia or dystopia of this kind of technology. What is important is to have this dialogue of challenges or not. For instance, I think we mentioned augmented intelligence as part of another word for artificial intelligence. And have in mind that every technological augmentation has an amputation as well. We externalize our memory into devices now, which has an amputation of the way that we remember things. It's just an evolution of things. In the same way that a recommender system can actually help us discover the unknown unknowns, that is for me just amazing into discovering a new type of music that there is no way I would have discovered with a group of friends that I have around me, but an algorithm is going to make that discovery for me. In the same time, the same kind of technology can build a filter bubble that we all being affected with, because the information and the kind of information that are fed to us are just fed to our profile. That's the imputation as well. So I see that if we're aware of this augmentation and what are the implications of this augmentation, I think that's the way that we can, not thinking in terms of utopia or dystopia or good and bad, but just what do we gain, what do we lose?
So this, I guess, all these possible implications are quite mind-boggling for the people starting to bring AI into their systems. And I believe here in the audience today we have, as Martin said, a very well-educated audience with a lot of knowledge, and a lot of the people here will see, or either they will be the leaders practicing and bringing AI into their solutions, they will be building intelligent systems themselves, or they will be front row in the development of bringing intelligent systems. What kind of responsibility, what kind of concrete actions do you think these people should be taking into account? And I'm thinking here, for instance, banks really not allowing black boxes and focusing on the interpretability of algorithms to be fair with loans, and avoiding the kind of examples that you set, right, of unintended consequences. What kind of responsibilities do you think the practitioners of AI that we all have here need to take into account so we're sure that we roll out intelligent systems, those bring value to the companies, but we do them in a responsible way?
So, okay, it's linked to a kind of ethic in doing our work. And I see there's kind of three elements. First is this kind of transparency. It's like being on stage today and being able to actually explain what we do and how we do things. This is one part of being responsible with that. It's part of the dialogue of saying, this is what's happening, that's what we're doing. And I think everybody sharing their experiences today are part of that kind of work. We're sharing. We're kind of try to be transparent on that. And it's part also on a way to educate on these new practices, and not only educate the population, but the regulators. This is something that we do a lot, mainly in Europe, on trying to understand what are the implications of all the work that we do with regulators that are just maybe 5 years behind. So we educate them and try to understand what does it mean on what we do. And eventually it's kind of transforming a culture, cultures to understand like data-driven or algorithmic-driven, what does it mean? And here again, what are the consequences, implications? What do we gain and what do we lose from that? So it's part of that's how I see the approach.
Do you agree with that, Daniel?
Yes, I do. I do agree with that. I found it interesting how I think that, I don't know, who knows Black Mirror, the TV show?
Yeah,
so,
very good.
I mean, Black Mirror is like that one episode where everybody rates everything, and then I think a few months ago I heard about the Shanghai Citizen Score. So it's a little bit like reality seems to catch up with art in a way, but I think for each and every one of us working with these technologies, I think it's important to just have a very personal point of view of where we see that acceptance or the line of acceptance. And I feel for the people who don't work in our industry, we have to find ways to make them understand and discuss with them what the implications are going to be. And I feel a lot of times it's tricky to just say everybody should be data literate, or because it's like, it's a lot to ask from people, right? The systems are becoming so complex, so how do we can find ways to easily explain? Like, I think we have to work with that.
The obligation of being clear and transmit the knowledge. Good. So, to wrap up, I wanted to do a near future exercise. That's for you to blame, Fabian. So I'm thinking year 2025, right? And there's some things in our life that will be very much the same as they are now. We find ourselves that we thought that things in 2017 will be radically different. They're not so different. So maybe listening to music would be a very similar experience. It was not a similar experience 20 years ago, but maybe in 2025 it is. Maybe moving around in the city because of driverless cars and so forth is a radically different experience. What do you think will be one experience. So this is a question to each of you. Can you please provide one experience that you think will be radically different in the near future, let's say, not put a date, due to artificial intelligence?
So, coming from a bank, I can tell you that the relationship and experience with money is going to be slightly different, and more importantly for me, the AI has an impact on the relationship. And here again, if we put technology in the middle between the relationship that humans had together before, and now there's a technology that starts to automate some processes, it means that there's a relationship of trust that is kind of lost. That's the amputation that I was discussing before, based on this augmentation. So for a bank, for instance, when we start to automate things, we have to understand how we can actually keep that relationship of trust, or augment it, actually, make it actually better through the use between people. Yeah.
So it's not lost because of technology intermediating.
Yes, yes. And so this type of experiences in the future, I think a trust relationship is going to be is impacted already through technologies. And I think technology can be also the answer to that. That's what we are exploring.
I'm going to try to talk my way out of it a little bit.
No, you cannot. You're on stage.
So I mean, like, obviously, like, autonomous cars, Uber, things like that are going to drastically change the way, I think, how we interact in our cities and lives. But I think there were two things that I found interesting. One was, I don't know if you heard about this app, Replica. It's an app who originally started because a woman wanted to recreate her passed away boyfriend, and she created an app that you can teach to talk like yourself and talk to you. And in a way, I found the thought interesting how, like, we bemoan that technology, like, robs us of reflection and reflecting of ourselves, but then in a way, how does technology reflects on us and ourselves instead of us, in a way. So I think there's some interesting feedback loop in there, that the thing that kind of like took the reflection from us might give us back the reflection as well.
That's nice. That is true.
And the other thing, there was another, like, Adobe Voco, which is supposed to be the Photoshop for voice. So essentially, they take an excerpt from you, 20 minutes. It's not a product yet, but essentially can cut and paste, and it sounds exactly like your voice and can make you say anything. Or this face-to-face where, like, Obama or Bush or whatever looks exactly and speaks exactly what I say at that moment. So I feel, rather than like a technology that's interesting, I found it interesting to see how our relationship to truth, for example, and news changes with these things. Like, are we going to dismiss everything as not news, or like I think there are a lot of like values that are going to change through these technologies in the next.
It's already changing. That's so true. That's so true. So thanks a lot.